All right, welcome back to the Real Barbecue Nerds, where the fire never dies, the brisket never lies. I'm David, your pit slinging co-host, and tonight's episode is all about the holy trinity of heat, meat, and patience, because I just wrapped up a marathon brisket cook that tested every ounce of my smoker know-how. Let's give a big shout out to the barbecue guru himself.
Oh, shoot.
The engineer of the Liberty 94, the smoke slinger, the creator, the innovator, Mr. Frank Cox.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate you, man. You always give me such a good intro, and I appreciate that. I got to see if I've got the right audio working here real quick, if you don't mind. Yeah, good. Okay. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Now that I'm got all that out of the way, get down to business here.
Oh my goodness, you're right. It's time to crack open a cold one. Tonight, I'm sticking with my pumpkin beer left over from Oktoberfest. Unfortunately, I'm running low on my supply. So this is a Shipyard Pumpkinhead. At this point, I'm going to say it's a well-aged beer because it's been around since September, October. But cheers to you. Cheers to the audience.
Cheers.
I'm going to enjoy this first sip.
Heck yeah. Hey, real quick, while we're doing that, I got something I want to do, if you don't mind. So I've been in front of a camera with barbecue for pretty dang long time. And there's somebody that I learned quite a lot from that passed away today. And I just want to give him a shout out and stuff like that. And all the people that I know. I'm going to share my screen real quick because I would love it if you guys that are listening to the audio version or watching right now, if you would go subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch the history of barbecue there. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional because this guy was very special to me. So give me 1 second here. I've never done it on here for a while, or it's been a long time since I did this. Allow, bam, share. So this is Wired BBQ. And what you're going to see is a lot of the brands of products and a lot of the people that are famous in barbecue. For instance, Danielle from Diva Q Barbecue. You're going to see her get her start in this content. So, like, there's a lot of really cool people that Dave impacted their lives. And this video right here on the page, when you land, it's Wired Barbecue Welcome. I would really appreciate it if you'd go and take a few minutes in your spare time and just kind of watch how barbecue evolved to what we see today. So anyway, miss you, Dave, already. So there you go. Dave Baldine of Kansas City, Missouri. So there you go. Appreciate that, Dave. Thanks for giving me an opportunity. I'll put the link down here in the chat real quick on all platforms. Bam. So there you go. What are we talking about tonight?
Well, Frank, what you just mentioned with this gentleman is a great segment into what we're doing. How instrumental somebody could have been to be an innovator in barbecue, to inspire others, and to bring people like myself and others in our audience to have the craft, the expertise, the training, and that's very similar to what we do here by speaking with those out there in the barbecue community and be able to inspire the next generation to enjoy backyard cooking, using their smokers and getting the training that will bring up their game to where you and I have been able to get to. So thank you, Dave Baldini, for inspiring my generation and how we're going to help the next generation. Amazing stuff.
Man. Yeah, I'm going to actually put his logo up for a bit if you don't care. I already got it loaded. So
I'm fine
dude,
with
the
that.
stories behind this guy. So Dave, there's a lot of cool people on the internet right now that have done a lot for barbecue, but it's really crazy to look back and watch how, like, Dave is the one that put their face on YouTube before there was barbecue pitmasters or any of that stuff. And I had the privilege of live streaming the American Royal, me and Dave together, along with some other guys in 2012, and I got to live stream the Jack with Dave. He actually got me into the Jack on a media pass, and so I owe him a lot for that. So we were able to do a global multi-stream from the American Royal and the Jack. Dave and I were, before there was the ability to do live streaming on the internet with video like that for a weekend, like without like a TV media crew. We were able to pull it off with a cell phone. So, and the wireless signal we were able to get from that. So, he had a rig called Franken camera that everybody will remember. It was like a battery box that was mounted to a dolly that had like this complicated antenna system and all of this extra stuff. And he worked for for one of the TV stations in Kansas City for years as the guy. That's how he knew how to do all of that. So anyway, segment over into tonight's show, Dave. Sorry about that.
So tonight's show is an interesting one. I had planned upon doing a pretty significant cook, and it just happened to be when I was down there in the Hunts Point Meat Market with the gentleman at Master Purveyors, where we came up with a great idea. When I walked in, I had my butcher coat on, I had my knives, I was ready to rock, and I saw hanging on the rail, on the hook, a brisket. It happened to be quite significant in size, bone in, fat cap there, 37-pound USDA prime brisket. We're talking when we're talking about everything Franken cube, Franken rig, this was the Franken brisket. That's what we had here. So
yeah,
we discussed, could I have that? Put it on the scale, and they said, Dave, take this with you. We bless you with this brisket. Do what has to be done.
Wow.
Trial this out, see what happens, and we support your endeavors. So the marbling on this was absolutely intense. Looking at that intramuscular fat, looking at the fat cap. Let's just get into that. When we look at our briskets, one of the things that we try to do when we're putting them onto our offset smokers is we want to get them as aerodynamic as possible. We want to be able to round them off, trim the fat, take off any little bit that's going to be hanging. The fat cap on this, Frank, was roughly 3 inches thick.
Yeah.
Bone in. We had the rib bones were still penetrating through. This was a dream come true to be able to take this, bring this home, and put this on my Liberty 94 offset smoker to be able to do a low and slow cook. This took me 19 hours of time. Every half hour, 2 sticks had to go on. Talk about inefficiency in cooking. That's four sticks every hour. But Frank, you know this better than I do. That's what this is all about. In fact, El Presidente himself had said, David, you're not doing it right unless you're going through such a large quantity of wood. The secret behind this is not only those rubs that you put on, but also that smoke flavor that you get from having all that wood that you're burning, all of that smoke that's coming through. It's not about efficiency of having radiant heat and decreasing the amount of wood. It's about having more wood. That's what it was. And I'll tell you, as we go through this, one of the key things that came into play was when this was a finished product. The smell of the smoke that was coming off of this. My house smells like smoke to this point because I had the garage door open all night long. My wife's still upstairs right now, burning candles, walking around the house, trying to deodorize every room. The car smells like this. My clothes My beard, I had to wash my hair and my beard 3 times using, I think one of them had like a menthol smell to it. I had to do anything possible to try to penetrate, get the smell out of all of my clothes, out of my hair, out of my skin. I cut myself up pretty good a few times with the knives. I wasn't being as careful as I should have, but
It's all
my
them
God,
beers you've been drinking.
yeah. And one of the things with beers, we joke around about this, you and I. I think you brought this up, that we don't want to go with the heavy beers because they weigh us down. We want to stick with those light beers,
The
not
all-day
because
beers.
we're trying to maintain, our slimish figure for the summertime. Coming up next month, we've got Memorial Day weekend, but rather those light beers allow us to carry our way through on a
Yep.
19-hour cook.
Stay hydrated.
Got to stay hydrated.
It's important to keep your health in check. You know, don't get dehydrated
That's
while you're
correct.
cooking for 19 hours.
So this wasn't just a brisket. This was a full-on protein monument. A brisket so big that it had its own gravitational pull.
Dude, if I'd have known you were going to say protein monument, I should have had like a glory sound that I could have played when you said that. I didn't know you were going to use that term. That's awesome. It is a
Yeah.
protein monument. We talked about this in our first episode, I believe, one of our first episodes of this podcast. We talked about doing a bone in brisket because we were going through the anatomy of a brisket and where it comes from and stuff like that. And you were putting on school about this cut. And so it's really cool to have the content available to be able to go back. I was traveling, so I couldn't stay tuned in, but I'm very excited to see the content from all of that. You were live for most of it, right? 3 times
So
or something?
so I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. I took my Liberty 94, got it outside, got the fire going, and then the plan. And of course, when you make a plan, you have to incorporate in Murphy's Law and all the
Yeah,
things that are going to go wrong. So the idea
absolutely.
was to get this thing on at 5 o'clock in the morning. And Murphy, whoever this is, I truly dislike you. Um, how you messed up my plans.
Yeah.
So I was down here in we'll call this my barbecue lab, prepping this brisket, and things aren't going right. And I got that Chops power injector, and I'm saying to myself, maybe I'll use this. We'll inject this. There's a lot here. I'm concerned that the method that I wanted to go with was not to trim this thing down. I wanted to keep the fat on. I wasn't going for aerodynamic. I wanted to take the whole piece the way as is, there as, and put it on. And as I'm going through, and you'll see this when the footage comes out, I start with a little bit of trim. Oh, there's a little piece hanging here. We'll get rid of it. We'll make this into sausage later on. Oh, we'll take this fat off. We'll render it down. It'll become some tallow. And I keep making excuses for why I have to keep putting a knife to the meat. Well,
Yeah.
before I know it, and with again, because it's not just as simple as set this thing up. I have to do video content. So I have to keep taking breaks and going back. It's already 5 o'clock in the morning. 2
Yeah.
hours just gone.
Yep.
So I start the process of the trimming, putting the things to the side. And now in my head, I'm saying, well, do I want to do a binder? Nope. Better idea. We'll just take some tap water, put some tap water onto it. And this is exactly what I did, and use that as my binder. And then I'll put my seasoning on. For this cook, I use a seasoning, gentleman named Steve Gow, Smoke Trails Barbecue up in Canada, our Canadian neighbors. And, he does a lot of research and development. Gentleman's cooked a ton of briskets, and he's an avid follower of someone in Austin, Texas, that we all
Okay.
know, Franklin Barbecue.
Yeah.
And his seasoning, he puts sumac in. He's got a salt, pepper, garlic,
Wow.
obviously, some other seasonings in that. I get my seasoning on. Everything's looking great. We're ready to go. Get myself upstairs. The pit is exactly where I want to be. It's rocking out at 225. I've got my wood going. Everything's maintained the right way. and then bam, the rainstorm comes in.
Oh,
Right. So
dang.
time out again. Time to go get a 12 by 12 pop-up tent. Let's get that going. So now the time goes further and further and further. Before I know it, everything's like the rain has now died down. I'm ready to go. It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So at 8 o'clock, I finally get this thing on. I'm running at this point on what I have available to me: white oak, red oak. And then for flavor later on, I decided I was going to have some of that delicious black cherry oak along with some apple that I had.
Yeah.
I get this thing on. It looks gorgeous. I'm even thinking to myself, I know how long this thing's going to go. I'm going to get tired. And with the rain, I may not want to be out here. So I go ahead and I hook up a temperature probe to the smoker so that I can monitor my grate temperature remotely. I take it a step further. I put some probes in because I'm concerned, which I should not have been, because the Liberty 94 really does its job. And we're going to learn about that on tonight's podcast. That I wanted to check from different areas of the brisket that I'm maintaining the right temperature, so I know when I want to wrap. Just in case in one area I'm too close to the bone, so it's going to have one area, one temperature, or I'm in the fat, or I'm in the point, or I'm in the flat. There's so many things going through my mind. It's the first time. I don't want to mess this thing up. Beautiful
Yeah.
brisket. So we finally get ourselves on 8 o'clock in the morning. Everything's going well. And I just, nervousness, things like that. I'm still sitting outside. I'm watching my tell true temperature. I'm watching my phone. I decided I was going to go live, thanks to our talk last week where we had people in our audience suggesting, do you think maybe, if you do a big cook, you could live stream the whole thing? Well, it didn't make much sense to do 19 hours straight.
Yeah.
That's more like a marathon. That would be more like a filibustering of a brisket. And we weren't going to do a filibuster.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, things humming along. I did 3 live streams that day. We had a nice audience. People who have smoke slingers and Liberty 94s and other offsets and drums, people that were at competitions out in Nebraska, others that are in the Carolinas. And we all just had such an open, great dialogue about various types of barbecue, talking about the brisket, how they've done things. And, it was just, we have such a wonderful community that came together, Frank.
That's
And,
cool.
because of you and Smoker Builder, these people in our community have really adapted to our podcast and join in. And it's just such a wonderful feeling. Again, going back to your buddy from Wired Barbecue,
Yeah.
the inspiration of people like him to where we are today and how we have such a wonderful barbecue community.
It's pretty incredible, man. Never forget the guys that are in the limelight right now. They had to struggle and start up just like you did. And because I know there's a lot of content creators that watch the show. Some pretty good YouTube channels in the comments there, and the people that hang out. And the thing about it is, Dave started out like in the very early days of YouTube, but he never stopped. He never gave up. He just kept rolling. Dave from Wired Barbecue, that is Dave Baldine. And for those guys just coming in, I just kind of got his logo up here on the top. Unfortunately, he passed away recently, and we're just kind of remembering him a little bit as he helped get this started, this whole barbecue bug that we got. Anyway, check out his channel. I dropped it in the comments earlier. Give it a subscribe. But yeah, man, it's really cool, the community, because if the guys that are publishing would not be publishing content, there would not be a community. It's the anchor. The content is the anchor that helps us to build those relationships. How many people in barbecue have you never met that you consider a friend? It's just what barbecue is. It's amazing. It's really cool. So, and people know your name. It's kind of like, what is that? Cheers.
Yeah,
Wasn't that the intro? It's kind of like that.
it's where everybody knows your name.
Yeah, it's cool.
So I want to thank you for also getting me that post oak wood, because at
Yeah.
some point during the day it showed up, and
Oh,
I
did it
really,
really?
yeah, I wanted to go all post oak on this. So I did mention the woods I started with, but those post oak woods that you brought into me from Georgia, wow! Talk about
Different
wood
deal.
that was dried to perfection. I was putting in two of those 8-inch splits at a time,
Mhm.
and it was really dynamic to be able to bring that into the cook.
Cool.
The smell, the flavor, the heat that it put off, a lot better than what I was able to get locally from my quote woodman.
Yeah.
No, no bark on it. Each piece was great. Um, in fact, for those that are using their smoke slingers, these fit great right there into your charcoal drawer because they're only 8 inches in length, and they
So
fit wonderfully just as well inside the excuse me the firebox, the 24-inch firebox on the Liberty 94.
so what was the brand of wood? Do you mind saying that? I can't
Um,
remember.
so it's the company is located in Georgia. Now you have to give me a second because
Sure.
I just
I started
forgot
getting their
myself.
ads today
You did.
on Facebook.
I'm sure they're coming in, namely
Yeah,
because of the all that we did here. So that was cutting edge firewood.
cool.
They're located in Georgia. The wood is, I'm going to say they're saying that it's 4 times drier and up to 3 times more dense.
Yeah.
Um, so it burns extremely clean. The smoke that came off of it was perfection. It wasn't that smoldering type of grayish smoke. And you
Mhm.
see, going back to fire to smoke reading. So when you see white smoke, it usually means that there's a lot of water in it. I did notice with some of the cherry wood and apple wood I was putting in, it began to sizzle, meaning that there
Mhm.
was definitely some sap that may have been left in there, definitely
Mhm.
water content. But this was bone dry, great stuff,
Cool.
clean smoke, and I really appreciate you getting that wood for me
Yeah,
because
man.
it was instrumental. It really kicked in and got this cook to the next level.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us about your temperatures. So what was your did you run one temperature the whole cook, or did you like how did you strategize your temperatures on the pit?
Great question. So I had the trifecta of temperatures. I was maintaining 225 to about 240. There were times it dropped below that 225 because you just
The
get busy
rain.
sometimes. You don't watch the rain.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different factors. This is a live cook, and
Mhm.
you have to be on top of this like a real caveman maintaining your fire.
Yeah.
But I maintained 225 for a good portion of the cook. I brought it up to 250, and then once everything was wrapped properly, and I did use butcher paper, as we called it last week, or
Brisket paper.
brisket paper, with the Wagyu beef tallow that I got from South Chicago Packing. Those that were
Cool.
watching the live stream thought this is hysterical. They're watching me scoop it out right from the container and just throw it on
Smack
there.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought I had enough butcher paper laid out, and I put one sheet right next to the other one, laid one on top of the other. We found out that because of the size of the brisket, the Franken brisket, I truly did not have enough to be able to do a full wrap. So I had to then get two more sheets and wrap it
Oh,
that much further. Yep,
yeah. Man, that wrapping process might have been a little bit interesting, huh? So did you take the 2 sheets and overlap them slightly and then, like, fold them in the middle
I
to try
did.
to seal them? Okay, yeah,
Yes.
and sealed them, and then you tallowed the bottom,
Yep.
slab of paper, put the brisket on, did the next one, and then did you boat the sides?
I even before that, because it's paper and I had the tallow on, that's one thing. But I felt it necessary to spritz the brisket from time to time. So
Uh-huh.
that liquid that I had in there, and I neglected the first time to mention what was in my spritz. I used a container of what's called Better Than Bouillon. It's a beef base. It's really great when you're making prime rib. So I used that as and I put some other trick ingredients in there, and
Mhm.
that was my spritz. So I put that spritz right onto the paper, which made it a lot more malleable to be able
Mm,
to turn and bend over and uh, make a Christmas present out of it. But
yeah.
no, I didn't do the fold up method. I had this thing
Okay.
fully wrapped up like a present. And I put
Oh,
that
okay,
back
cool.
on, kicked the temperature up to 275. Once I well the point of the stall was at 170. That's when I took
Mhm.
it off. I went through this whole process of wrapping and then putting it back on. All in, like I said, it was 19 hours of smoke that it got. Amazing stuff.
Cool. So then you had about what, have about a half hour between times you added wood, maintaining your
Every half
cold
hour.
bed?
Yep.
Yeah, and that worked out pretty good, that rhythm did, 2
It
splits
was.
every half
So
hour?
I had the rhythm of the fire management to in order to keep a clean blue smoke and avoid
Mhm,
any of that bitter creote buildup, creosote buildup. So it was nice. I had to maintain. I had to make sure on my smokestack that I had that properly set up on my firebox. I had the air intake set up in
mhm.
order to maintain those temperatures. There were times I cracked the door open. I played around with the shovel, moved around a lot of that coal bed so that I can maintain the temperature the way that it was, get a lot of the ash out of the way. So, it's work. You have to baby this. This is not a set it and forget it. We're not dealing with a pellet smoker where the joke in the industry is, it's that you're dealing with the Betty Crocker version, of cookers, because you can walk away, you put your temperature probes in, and the computer does its own thing. This isn't
Yeah.
the easy bake oven. This is advanced cooking, and brisket is that top echelon. You're at the apex of cooking. It's what everybody wants to do. And you have to put the time in. You're going to sit there and you're going to do it. You can't walk away. It's the mother-in-law of cookers because you
Mhm.
have to be there to play with it and not spend time with your mother-in-law.
That's right.
That's just the benefit of it.
Great stuff, man. So tell us a little bit about the brisket itself. So you mentioned earlier that it had the chine bone in. It still had some of the ribs poking through.
That's
Real
right.
quick, Dustin's asking me if I can see their comments, and yes, we're just not pulling them up yet because we're geeking out a little bit. We're nerding out on the details of this brisket because I haven't seen it personally yet. So explain the anatomy of that brisket a little more detail.
So the
Yeah,
brisket
no,
is the
Jason.
pectoral muscles. It's the pectoral
Mhm.
muscle of the cow. There's
Yeah.
there's two of them on there. There's the left and the right. I can't tell you if I have the left or the right at this point, because I was just punch drunk out of it. I'm still
Mhm.
exhausted from this cook. It kicked my butt a little bit. Um, so I did, like I mentioned earlier, trimmed it down a little bit, but this was not perfectly rounded aerodynamic. I cooked it
Mhm.
all the way through, bone down. I was asked, did I flip it? And the answer was no. I didn't want to ruin that beautiful bark that I had on the top. It was that nice meteor black color,
Mhm.
but it was bone down the whole way. The bone on one hand does help to protect it, but on the other hand, when those bones get hot, it does create radiant heat, bringing it back up. But
Yeah.
fortunately, because of the amount of fat that was on this, it was constantly um, basting in its own juices the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what made it so tender and delicious and juicy because not only did the meat have all that marbling, that intramuscular fat, but it had all that other fat that was on there. So you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So was the fat and the bone on opposite sides or same side? Tell
Fat
me
was over the
how.
top. Yep.
Uh-huh.
So on the so we'll just say the top and the bottom to keep this simple. So all on the
Yeah.
top, beautiful fat. I did trim it down a little bit, but then there's typically, and I can't remember off the top of my head, there is a piece of meat and muscle that well, muscle is meat that you take would have come off in order to just get to the brisket. So
Uh-huh.
I had plenty of fat from the bone to the brisket, and then I had well more than enough fat coming over the top. So as we all know,
Okay.
the point is going to be your fattiest portion. So there was a
Yeah.
tremendous amount there. Your flat is your leaner portion. So that's when I had put this on, I wanted to make sure that the bones that were protruding was the side that faced towards the throat of my firebox. So
Yeah.
that was the end that could take a little bit more heat.
Mhm.
Obviously, the point that was pointing towards my smoke collector, and I did maintain that the whole way through. I didn't rotate it. I didn't flip it. None of these crazy different ways. It was really just get it on. It was
Yeah.
tremendous, and cook it through that way and try to do the least amount to this, even though I had the computer systems hooked up just for
Yeah.
my own mental state.
So here you go. Dustin El Presidente wants to know, did you get any sleep?
He was so on my last live stream at about 10 o'clock at night. We didn't have many people, and he said, "David, you got to get to sleep. You can't be out there all night long. It's already 10 o'clock. You don't know how much longer this thing's going to go in the stall." So he gave me a technique that I had to just go with because he knows his smoker better than any of us. He,
Mhm.
he did the R&D. He figured this thing out. So he told me, put more wood in. Build yourself a log cabin inside of your firebox, which is exactly what I did. Think of this like a jazz trio when we talk about a wood. We had our post oak laying down the beat, our black cherry walking the bass line, and the apple riffing those high notes.
There you go.
Every split at this point, when he told me to do this, every split mattered.
Yeah.
So I had 8 splits going. No, I had 6, excuse me. No, yes. So this way, this way, this way, this way. So that's right. So we had 3 levels of wood, 6 splits going. He
Yeah.
said, I want you to do all that. Then I want you to go back to your firebox and on the air intake, on your pinwheel damper, open it no more than a third of a way, maybe even close it down a little bit more. Then go back to your chimney and have that open about an eighth of an inch. That's it.
Oh, wow.
And he said, stop, just watch the temperatures. And it did. It got up to about 300 and something degrees. And I'm watching this. And then it started to come down. And it sat there at about 275, 280, would spike up to 290. That's just the way that it goes because you get a little bit of wind,
Sure.
but it held. And he said, now go to bed. Come back in about an hour. Take a look. At least you can sleep an hour at a time.
Yeah.
Just maintain it.
Mhm.
I did this a couple of times. Before I knew it, I came over. I checked. I couldn't do the check where you're able to bend your brisket to see is it jiggly, this or that. It's a lot of paper on there. So what it really came down to is just taking my fingers and pushing into it to feel what it was.
Yeah.
Taking my thermopen and checking for probe tenderness, and it was there at
Cool.
3 o'clock in the morning. 19 hours into it, it was finally time to pull it. But then Murphy's Law played in one more time. Murphy wasn't done playing with me. Guess what
What
happens next?
happened? The rain.
No. It was raining and it was freezing. But no. We had the tent up. Everything was wonderful.
Mhm.
The brisket was too big to fit in the cooler.
Oh,
Yeah. So
darn it.
yeah. So now I'm saying to myself, I'm gonna have to use my Liberty 94 as a warming oven. Um, I'm delirious at this point. I'm thinking, all right, maybe I will go to the pellet cooker. I'll fire that up. I'll put this onto the pellet cooker, tell it 150, and use that as my easy bake warming oven. But I was too far gone. I said, I'm just going to maintain this thing. I backed down. Actually, I put a little bit more wood in because the coals were just glowing orange. I put a couple more pieces of wood in, and I had that inner El Presidente thought. I'll close down the air intakes even further. I'll close
Mhm.
down the chimney a little bit further and pray to the brisket gods that this will hold the temperature and not go to like 200. We can maintain 150 to 170. And
Yeah.
thank goodness, because I never set an alarm. I that was it. I left it on, wrapped, and I walked away. And before I knew it, it was 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
So
wow.
I find from 3 to 4, I'm having this like delusional thoughts. What am I going to do? It doesn't fit in here. I want to wrap it up with towels, just put it inside of my cooler, put the cooler in the garage, close the door, and deal with the nightmare of cleanup tomorrow morning. But that was it. But the Liberty 94, because it's full 1/4 inch steel, it
Mhm.
was able to have that carryover heat.
Yeah.
And it maintained its way all the way through to the next morning when I got up, and I was a little panicky, like, what's going on? I was at about 90 something degrees on the cooker, but
Hmm.
it was wonderful. At that point, we figured out some other things to do, and it then put a little more wood in this and that. So at this point, here's where it gets interesting. We had 19 hours to get it to tender, but another 14 hours to get it to glory. That's
To
another
glory.
14 hours of holding temperature.
Yeah.
So I'm into this thing at this point for 33 hours.
Wow. But it was phenomenal, right?
I I wasn't planning upon having this at a buddy's party, but the day beforehand, he had said to me, "We're having a surprise engagement. My daughter's getting engaged." I said, "Oh, this couldn't have worked out at a better time. I've got enough meat here, and I don't have enough eaters." So I had brought this down to his house. His wife, from time to time, doesn't appreciate when I cook in the kitchen because I make a mess. I think what really comes down to is she doesn't like that it becomes like a food throwdown, and it's like who's the better cook. And she does very traditional Italian cooking. And here's me coming in with the most American Texas low and slow brisket to the Italian party. Uh, the caterers are there, everything's going, and I set up my camera, people looking, and they're like, "What is he doing? Why is he videotaping himself in your house? Why is he all mic'd up and pushing people away and telling them if you're going to be on camera, you have to sign a release?" Uh, so they gave me a big wooden
Awesome.
board. The caterer was there, and she's like, "Dave, just go to work." And I sliced that thing up. Took the globs of fat, just pulled it off. I'm in there, and you'll see this later on. And the bones just pulled right out, so tender. The bones pulling out. Sliced up that point, sliced off my burnt ends. Got everything perfectly lined up on that wooden board. And as people are walking into the house, what do you think the first thing they asked for was?
Brisket.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the engagement party. 0 point to it. Nobody even cared.
Where's the where's the brisket?
Look, David's here. He's cooking again. David's cooking. So they
Awesome.
came in. There's the brisket laid out, and there's two cruise ships of sushi set up, and there's hanging bacon and pretzels, and there's a crudette platter, and there's a charcuterie board, and there's little hamburgers, and there's food all over the place. But everybody found their way over to that brisket. It was a moment of
That's
glory. You would
awesome.
have been proud to walk into the room.
It'll be fun to show on video too, man.
I felt like
Yeah.
Moses parting the Red Seas and leading my people to freedom, to barbecue brisket freedom.
Get through some comments here real quick. Howdy, Greg. Appreciate you joining us tonight. We got Carlton's cooking. Evening, gentlemen, he says. No sleep. I'm exhausted, Dave said. Moose in the house. Let's see here. Getting on down. We talked about my bro, Dave Baldine. TD Price, what's happening, brother? Let's see. We were talking about technology and Dave's camera, Franken camera. Dave Baldine's Franken camera. And it says here, what Greg says, with technology now, there's no secrets anymore. Everybody should be able to make excellent barbecue at home. I see guys rub or sauce, etc., and in minutes can find very similar or same in minutes because everyone has done it pretty much. In Academy, yep. You name it, they carry it. They sure do. So was it El Presidente wants to know about 37 pounds? Was that pre-trim or after trim?
No, so great question. So that was the hook that was hanging on the hook on the rail, 37 pounds. That counts
Cool.
for the bone, that counts for the fat. That's all in 37 pounds, which is what the idea here was, to try to get as close to that 37 pounds without having to trim it.
Yeah. Awesome. Chris says, what makes it USDA prime? How do you know?
The United States Department of Agriculture inspectors, the ones who make the determination, looking at the slaughterhouses, at the packing plants. They're the ones that give it the certification of prime, choice, select, ungraded, That's where that comes from. And it really the whole idea is looking at the marbleization that's on there, and that's how they determine what type of grading that meat gets.
So, question real quick about that. I don't want to go down too far down the rabbit hole. I just want to
Sure.
hit it on the surface. Do they do that by ultrasound, or do they do that after like a certain cut is cut off?
No, they look at it. That's visually
They
done.
physically
There,
look at
yeah. So
like a
there's
ribeye.
correct, but at this point in time with technology, there's cameras that are able to make that determination as the meat's coming through. It can scan it. So we'll say it's laser scanned. There's a camera that scans it that can make that determination, but there's no ultrasound.
Oh, okay. Reason I asked about ultrasound is because at the fair, when the kids are bringing their pigs in, that's what we're
Mhm.
doing is we're looking at the loin, and that lady, there's a certain lady that comes in that has that machine and all that stuff, ag department, and she can kind of look and give the kids a grade based on
Mhm.
that on the live animal,
Okay.
on what that is. Just a walking grade, but I imagine they're more accurate with what they're doing.
Yep.
Yeah. Hojo, how you doing, buddy? Glad you're here. Let's see. Chris says, "LOL the beard." He's talking about the smoke beard. He remembers he knows the feeling. Dustin's advice is to embrace the smell. No need to fight it at this point. Hojo says you should have used tomato juice or get it all up in that beard and rub it around. That's what they do for the skunks. Hilarious. Uh, let's
We're
see.
talking about tomato juice. There came a point where people are like, is this the point where you start the Bloody Marys? Because it's like, it's the morning time. You might as well indulge with some vodka. Get rid of the beer, get over to the tomato. So they're right. I should have, flushed this thing out with a little V8.
TD Price says Smoke Slinger community is the best community ever. If you guys don't know where to go to the Facebooks and type in Smoke Slinger Pit Owners Group and you'll join it. You could actually self-join. It's a public group actually that's heavily moderated. We talked about the wood. Chris was asking. You said about every 30 minutes, 2 splits.
Yep.
How long was your wrap? Do you remember total?
So I'm going to go through this one in my head. I believe it was about 8 o'clock at night. I feel like it was about 8. No, it's longer than, yeah. So it's 12 hours in. Wow. I'm delirious at this point. I was telling El Presidente that I forgot to bring the chalk outside. Usually what I do is I write down, the starting temperature and the time. And all
Mm,
through, I'll write directly on the cooker what I'm doing so that
great
I
idea.
have a journal going, a
Mhm.
logbook, to see what I'm doing. But I'll tell you, Frank, with the rain, chances are the chalk would have washed off
Walk
anyway.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Greg was saying you ought to put a pellet hopper on that firebox, buddy. That'll straighten you right out. Get that warmer going. We've actually done that on some pits. I have, and it doesn't work good in the firebox. It works better in the actual cook chamber. But there you go. Yeah, no. Shout out to Tall Beer Man. That's Jason LaFon. By the way, yeah, no is a very funny Wisconsin. It's Jason. Pop it down in the comments if you're still watching. I think it's Wisconsin. You know, it's a really funny podcast about people in Wisconsin. I laugh my butt off when I listen to that. How did the bone affect the way you cooked it? Chris asks.
It didn't. Well,
It protected
it
primarily, is what I
protected.
understood.
Yeah, I guess for those that will rotate the brisket around, just turning it or even flipping it over. In that case, this affected it because I didn't do any of that. I use the bone as the blocker. You'll see people take a wood split sometimes and put it into their cook chamber to use it as a blocker from the heat that's
Mhm.
coming through on the throat. But with the Liberty 94 and that flow tuna baffle, it's not necessary. I'm able to fine tune and adjust my cooker to where I want to be, and that's how we get that brisket perfection.
Yeah, and that's a really good point is and we'll talk about that here coming up in the next segment. We're gonna talk about
Mhm.
the Liberty 94 and heat zones and management and stuff like that. And it honestly does not matter how you put a brisket on that cooker. It's going to cook
Mhm.
just fine if you're using the baffle. So we'll bring that up here in a minute. Burn ends. Was there burn ends?
There were burn ends. That was mine. There were a few people
Master
that I was
privilege.
very, very generous to. I let them get that first bite. I wanted to get people's reactions, but again, if I'm in the public, that's your fault for being on camera. But because this is a private residence, without their okay, I can't put people on camera to get the reaction. However, I forgot that I was mic'd up. So while the camera was focused directly on the meat, which it's sliced like warm butter, but held the shape like a brisket with something to prove, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the audio is there. And one of the discussions came up is that it might sound like an episode of Cops if I have to keep bleeping everything. They're like, beep, 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 beep. This is the best beeping brisket, beep, 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 beep. Yeah, you got a
It'll
lot
be
of.
fun to edit.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yep. Chris says you need to get a bigger cooler, man.
It's there. The ones that I used for when we go fishing, offset fishing and such. One of the gentlemen that has one, David, he understands. He's a fisherman down in Florida. I have the big fishing coolers, but I wasn't going to dig those out to stick this in. I have to move a lot of stuff out of the way. I went with what was available at that time in the morning.
Yeah.
I didn't, again, Murphy's Law. I didn't plan this out accordingly.
Yep. Greg is saying, Dave, try this. And I think he's talking about something from Lang Barbecue Smokers called the Fire Dog. If you guys want to check that out, see what that is. Hojo wants to know if you wore your City Slickers costume. I love that. At your buddy party.
So I wore that to the party.
Awesome.
I had the cowboy boots on. I had that flannel shirt. The only thing I was missing was the cowboy hat, and I wanted to get as close to the costume as possible. But I knew, being that this is my buddy and his family, the abuse that I would have taken if I would have walked in with a cowboy hat.
That was my next question.
Yeah, there was a lot of slinging of adjectives going back and forth already. So that would have just really put it over the top. And I don't know if the footage we could have used any of it to edit it if I had that
Good
on.
move. Good move. What's up? The Suss family there.
The Such family are the ones who I'm talking about when it comes to needing a big cooler for going fishing. They
He
understand.
got it. Yeah, for sure. Daniel Perez says to make great barbecue. I think he meant great. You just need to put in the time. He's right. Thank you there, Scott. He's talking about my Ducks Unlimited shirt. I killed a lot of ducks in this shirt. Dave used the special wood,
Yes, he
is
did.
what Dave said. Ed Sims, our brother, how you doing? Great to see you here with us tonight. 1 cubic foot of post oak in Michigan per bag is $28. Do you remember what that was? It was boxes,
For
I think.
50-pound box was 149. However, here's what they did, because we had some conversations. It was buy two, get one free. So we ended up with 150 pounds of wood for the price of 2 boxes.
Yeah, that's cool. It was a good
Yeah.
deal. I highly recommend the outfit. Do you mind putting the link in the comments? Do you have it handy?
Sure, I can pull that up.
Yeah,
You
if
got
you
it.
don't mind pasting that in there. And Dave is going to get that done. And here in a minute, I got to open a beer first because it's that time. And then we're going to get into talking about the Liberty 94. Hell, here we go. Greg Williamson. Have you ever seen Dave younger and no beard, and then he wanted to look like Frank? What the heck? Oh my gosh, that's funny. I got all that gray in there, man. That gray in this beard was earned. Let me tell you. How many years of paying my own paycheck? and at least 30 years in the refrigeration industry. So that's a whole nother deal there. So, yeah, we're going to get into talking about the Liberty 94s. So, first off, Dave, I want to know uh, which one. So, I know you cooked it on the Liberty 94,
Correct.
but do you think that the full size smoke slinger would have got it done in 8 hours?
You know, we have.
It's a loaded
It's one
question.
thing to say that it's a theory. It's another thing to say that it's proven. We have objectively demonstrated whether it was a whole vacío, whether it was a beef shoulder clod, whether it was a
A
whole
brisket.
hog, a brisket, all these large cuts of meat magically are ready in 8 hours. So that's a great question, which
So
then
now we
makes
got
me
to
think,
try it.
should I go get it? Yeah, now I got to do it again.
I don't know if I'd go get another one yet. I'd let it kind of chill out a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe cook some ribs.
yeah. I think that we're going to take it easy. In fact, one of the gentlemen in here, Mr. Williamson himself, had suggested to me that I do these Mexican pork chops. I'm going to be pulling
That
out the
sounds
smoke
good.
slinger tomorrow, and we're taking some double cut pork chops, cutting a pocket in it, and stuffing it with Mexican cheese and some other seasonings, and putting some stuff on the
Oh
outside.
my goodness.
And we're going to do Mexican pork chops tomorrow night for Taco Tuesday.
That sounds amazing. I keep forgetting that today's Monday. I'm like thinking it's almost Saturday. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So on the Liberty 94, we were going to talk about the setup you used, and then we were going to kind of get into some efficiency conversation about just offsets in general and what makes an inefficient offset a desirable thing, in my opinion, in your opinion, and kind of stuff like that. So real quick, as far as your flow tuner baffle, how did you have that set up for this cook?
So the way that I do it, and again, this goes back to one of the techniques that you had shown me. So we're looking at our flown tuner baffles. They're pinwheel dampers. So with the handle, I tend to turn each one to the outside, but that
Hmm.
would create a gap where it's half and half. I kind of close them up a little bit more, so it's about quarter of an inch open on each side, and that's
Hmm.
about it. I don't want a ton of heat coming through. I want enough heat that's coming up or up around the baffle and a little bit coming through, and that's how I tuned mine. What's
Hmm.
nice about the flow tuner baffle and the way that we have our Liberty 94 set up is that I can very easily take the cooking grates that are in there. And even though I had the brisket on, I can slide one underneath the other. I just have to lift it up a little bit and get one underneath. So if I ever wanted to get down to the flow tuner baffle, if I wanted to tune it just a little bit further, I have that accessibility to do such.
That's a great point. Something that's often overlooked is if you're just cooking a brisket or two or something like that, you don't need the entire surface area of that cooker. So that gives us the opportunity to go in there and play around with that baffle a little bit if we think we want to. So something you and I have spent a little bit of time talking about behind the scenes here, just in conversations about using the pit more from a just technical standpoint. Um, is the fact that we can own our temperature zones in this
Mm,
pit. And I think what's really important about that, what I mean by that, and there's probably a way better way of saying it, is we're able to create temperature zones, or we're able to get rid of temperature zones like at will. We can do however we want to run that pit by doing what you just said, adjusting those baffles, letting more radiant heat come in under our rack by opening those baffles, those pinwheels up, closing them to prevent that, and also moving that plate because you can slide it lengthwise inside the chamber farther away from the wall or closer to the wall. All of those, or just remove it entirely. So, as far as your cook goes, how far off the wall were you?
The way that I do mine is I get a 2 finger length distance. So if this right here, I have to remember we're on radio too. So
Yeah.
looking at the baffle, I want to be able to take, let's say it's a tape measure or fingers as such, and I want to have the distance from where the throat of my cook chamber is to where the firebox is. I want roughly about an inch, maybe a little less than an inch from where we're going to be parallel of the baffle to the throat. So that's it. The gap in between is,
Horizontal.
yeah, horizontal, exactly.
Yeah. So the plate from the baffle plate from the firebox wall was probably an inch and a half inch
About an
off
inch,
the
I'd
wall.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's as close as you can get it, I think, because the feet will hit, if I remember
correct.
correctly, that hold it straight up. So something that I like to do, and I've done with other pits, because I've put similar things. I've not done this baffle, but I've done similar baffles in other pits, and I like to be able to slide that away from the wall, and I'll actually create a super hot zone right there, because you can run this pit as hot as you want. You can get it up around 600 degrees if you feel like it, and you can do reverse sears on this pit, which is really important to understand that it's good to be able to do that. Like move your stuff around. Like when you do these chops, I know you're going to do them on the full size smoke slinger because it's like the perfect pit for that. But you could duplicate that in a very similar way on a Liberty 94 if you decided to. Yeah, something else you can do there.
That would be a game changer to be able to get a reverse sear on a traditional offset.
Yeah, yeah. The way we used to have to do it is we would have to have one cooking grate in the cook chamber, and we'd have to actually put charcoal inside the cook chamber to do it.
Wow.
But you don't have to do that now. You can just like light a incredibly hot fire as big as the throat opening is on the Liberty 94. It moves a ton of air. And then you've got that baffle sitting there right in front. You can move it down about 6 inches away. Excuse me, I'm drinking all them beers. Anyway, then you got to flip your chops over 1 minute and 1 minute, done, seared. It's cool. You got that flame coming up if you have it wide open. So, but yeah, as far as efficiency on offset smokers, when we first started out building and designing pits, and I talked about it, I think last week, I don't remember, maybe, where I was talking about the scavenger hunt you could do on the internet, and you could see where I learned how to design pits. It's a different forum. It's not my own. And bonus points for whoever can figure out what my name was on that forum, because it's different. But anyway, when we were on there, the quest at the time was to have dead even cook chamber temps. And when I say dead even, I don't mean like it's the same temperature across. I mean, we're dissecting atoms, to try to like really get it perfect on the engineering side, and then duplicate it on all these other different styles of pits. And that's what pit design was all about back in the day, because we were so used to cooking on like box store cookers and homemade pits that were built on assumption, not design, that we just were tired of that. We wanted to just be able to throw a log in, go back in the house for 45 minutes, come back out, throw another log on, and have that consistent, dependent cooking style with clean blue smoke. But as you're learning, that's actually like a hindrance to really great barbecue.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I was hoping that I could time this thing out every 45 minutes, throwing a split in, but I learned a very important lesson. That's not true. You
Hmm.
want to have more wood burning. You want to have more smoke. You want to get that rolling consistently all the way through and maintain, like we're talking about, that blue smoke, not black heavy smoke, not the gray smoke, the brown smoke that you can see that at any point that brown smoke means we're gonna have a flashover. That means that there's a possibility we're gonna have a grease fire. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So when I remember back in the day with one of my first pits, I was frustrated because of course, I started on a Traeger 070 back when they were made out of metal. That was my first smoker. And I remember I just didn't taste any smoke, even back then when things were sloppy in the pellet cooker world and they were just getting kind of started. Um, I just remember it had great texture. The overall product was good, but I didn't have like this awesome flavor of smoke. I couldn't even tell it was hickory or apple or whatever. And I thought I had problems with my palate. I just thought I just couldn't tell. And so I really started to put some energy into that. And that's when I got on the internet and started searching these forums and stuff. And I learned that like there was this whole group of guys they called the Order of the Thin Blue Smoke, you know. And I thought, my God, if I could just be like those guys. And I started to really research and think about it and stuff like that. And I never could really figure it out. So I wound up looking at the cookers that they were cooking on, and I was like, their food just looks so different than mine, just in the texture and the picture and all of that. It just looked better. And so I said, well, I guess I got to get a reverse flow. And that's when I started asking, like, okay, well, I ain't going to buy one. I'm going to build one because I could do that. And so, how do I design this thing to where I can get that kind of product? And it was really difficult to get the questions answered because people really didn't know, honestly. And I remember after I built that reverse flow, I remember I had the same problem. I couldn't taste the smoke. And so it was years later. Sometimes the obvious is not so obvious. And it was years later, and I started wondering about guys like that were building pits that were different than the pits we were designing. They were inefficient, like Franklin when he did his PBS special.
Mhm.
And, you know, he was building those pits, and we were like laughing at him and being like, well, I don't care how famous he is or like, you know, what his barbecue tastes like. He ain't building that pit right, you know? And so we started like throwing a lot of trash his way and other builders that way. And we're like, they're just not doing it right. And then I started seeing these guys showing up on the Texas Top 50 monthly. And I was, how in the world are they doing it? Like, how are they getting in the Texas Top 50? And all of these guys are cooking on pits that are built wrong. And then I started asking myself, oh, maybe it's a flavor thing because they're on the Texas Top 50 and their barbecue's great. So there must be something I'm not seeing here. And then we started exploring like a sloppy fire and stuff like that. And here we are. Now we've come full circle. We're started out saying like, you're not, this is the right way to do it. You're all not doing it right. And then we came all the way back over here. And now we're like, oh, we've been doing it wrong all this time. It should be sloppy and it should be wasteful so that you can get better product. That's kind of the whole deal in a nutshell, how it all happened. And now here we are with the Liberty 94, where we want a sloppy fire, we want great flavor, but at the same time, we want to make it easy for a pitmaster to run a pit, right? So enter the Flowmaster baffle plate, and that's kind of how we're doing it.
And you know, when you say make it sloppy, that's probably the best way to do this is not to be so nice and organized. Just throw the wood
Mhm.
in. It's okay. Put the wood in.
Yeah,
As long as you have those hot coals going, you have that great coal bed, the wood's gonna light. Whether you put
yeah,
the wood in from the end of the firebox to the end of the throat, or you're going crisscross, or you're going directly across, whatever it is, the wood's gonna burn. It's there. And if you have a shovel and you find that you want to move the wood a little bit closer, a little bit further back, with a 24-inch firebox, there's plenty of room to move your splits around, especially when
yeah,
you're using 8-inch splits. You have plenty of room to move things around.
yeah. That's a key thing, and I'll show that question here. Chris was asking, what size splits you use on the Liberty 94. I think you were using 8-inch splits. I cut my own wood, and it just depends on how much I'm paying attention, but or who's running the saw. If it's me or it's my boy or something like that, we're trying to hit somewhere around 10 inches on average, is what
Mm-hmm.
I like to say. And then about 2 to 2.5 inches in diameter, which brings me to this. What was the average diameter of your splits you were running?
Great question. So with the white oak and the red oak, those are like 12 to 16 inches in length, way
Mhm.
bigger than what I would have liked. When it came to the black cherry wood and the apple wood, that was 12 inches. Everything was universally cut. Same thing I got down to the post oak, that came professionally done. So the diameter on that, each one is squared off. It actually looks like almost like a fence post. They're
Mhm.
perfectly cut so they fit in the box that way too. The rest
Mhm.
of them are all like a pie shape. So the
Yeah.
the, the thickest portion of that coming across is probably 2.5 to 3 inches. When
Perfect.
we're dealing with the post oak that's coming from cutting edge firewood, each one of those is uniform. They're all square. So I'm going to say total around it's probably again like 3 inches, if that.
Yeah. So that's what I shoot for on any pit that's less than 200 gallons. I'm shooting for something in that range, like a 10 to 8 to 12-inch split is great. You can always put a few more splits in, something around 2.5 to 3 inches in diameter. And when we get up to bigger pits, like, bigger than 250, 500, 1,000, now we're getting into those 16-inch long splits. I still want a smaller diameter, something like like maybe a 3-inch or 4-inch max on a big split for a big offset. I would rather put more splits in
Mm-hmm.
and get a faster combustion than to have a big split in there that's going to last a long time. This is not a wood furnace. This is not like we're not running a wood boiler here that we're going to be gone all day and we need this split to last all day. So we're not going to fill it up full of wood. We got to have it where it combusts and then we can reliably keep our coal bed going, which I want to point out here. Chris also said Dustin El Presidente needs to bring home a Liberty 94. And then Dustin came back with Cobbler's kids, bro. Cobbler's kids are the last to be shooed, is what he says. Do you think that the spacing on the baffle plate affects efficiency? And he's talking about the spacing from the firebox wall out on these baffle plates. And I do believe it affects efficiency. So whenever you're dealing with complete combustion on a wood fire, right? We're dealing with we need to get enough air through the coal bed for heat, and we need to get enough air through the wood for complete combustion so that we have blue smoke, not white smoke. And we need to carry that heat the full length of the pit. Now remember, we're talking about a horizontal cook chamber here. So we're trying to carry that heat level across the length of that chamber. And on 1,000-gallon, we're talking about 16 feet. We got to carry that heat load. So of course, that baffle plate, the spacing from the firebox wall out with that gap horizontally for those guys that are listening on the radio, that's where we're getting into. It will make a difference because if we create restriction at the throat opening or at that baffle plate gap, we're going to limit the amount of airflow that we have going horizontal through the chamber. So a smaller cook chamber is more forgiving, and that's where the efficiency comes in. So if we want to have a bigger temperature difference, which sometimes we do, like Dave and I were just talking about with his pork chop thing he's going to do, which sounds amazing. If he was going to try to tackle a recipe like that with reverse sear on the offset instead of the full size smoke slinger, then we would get into needing that baffle plate gap farther off so that we can get that hot zone and the cooler zone. But if we're talking about filling that cooker up horizontally full of briskets all the same size and not wanting to flip and rotate constantly, now we're wanting to minimize how much temperature difference there is across that whole entire pit. So now we need to get the top down airflow, and then we're going to move that restriction to the smokestack. I know I'm waving my hands a lot and using a lot of big words. If you want to really understand how that works, I have a whole engineering course on this on smokerbuilderu.com. But we're trying to get turbulent airflow that goes top down all the way to the end, to the collector end, and then all that air spins and goes back towards the firebox, like a reverse flow, but upside down. Sorry. Nerding out. That's
right.
the name of the podcast anyway. So yes, Dustin, I do believe that we have designed the perfect pit together. And this thing will do whatever you ask it to do. Where are we at there? Oh, here. Brother Donnie, Pitmaster T, he remembers the Order of the Thin Blue Smoke. Now let's see if you can find my name on that site there, bro. Scavenger hunt time. Hilarious.
As I was cooking, Donnie had made a comment to me through Messenger or one of the other apps. He's like, "You look so miserable out there. You should look happy that you're doing this." Like, I'm 19 hours in.
Come
How
on, bro.
happy do you want me to be? Every half hour I'm doing this. It's raining. It's freezing out here. We used to call this type of temperature when we're out there fishing that the weather was snotty. It was snotty weather. And that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Cold, miserable, gray skies. You got layers on and you're just bundled up with a
Yeah,
cold
for
beer.
sure, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So Scott wants to know, Dave, would you do this again as an something extra for future cooks?
I would definitely do this again. And I'm gonna let you know,
Well,
Scott, if
so
you
that we got
ever
to real quick, Dave, we've
yeah,
got 65 people watching right now that missed out what you did. So kind of give them a teaser what you did real quick.
so what I did was take a meat hanging on the hook, 37-pound bone-in USDA prime brisket, big fat cap on there, bone in, the whole bit. And I cooked this thing low and slow for 19 hours, let it rest for another 14 hours. And I'm going to let you know, Scott, if you ever get your hands on a bone-in brisket, treat it like the crown jewel. It's rare. And when you
Very
get it
rare.
done right, it's life-changing.
It is. I can only imagine. Our first episode of this podcast, by the way, whether you watch it live on the YouTube channels or Facebook, or if you go to iTunes and listen to it, I think it's in its entirety on iTunes, the first episode. But we talked about a dream of doing this.
Yes.
Dave just happens to have some very special connections through his butchering background and was able to pull it off. So huge shout out for that. That's pretty awesome.
So here's the thing, Master Purveyors has a retail end. So if you go to www.masterpurveyors.com, you can order your retail meat. You can get all this prime meat. You can get your Wagyu. You can get the Carabuta pork. All that's available. However, if you're looking for that piece of meat that's wrapped up in butcher paper that you see the gentleman with the white coats on and they throw it up on top of their shoulder, that's a little bit different. You're going to have to go out there to the Hunt Point Meat Cooperative. You're going to have to go take that truck just like I did to go pick it
Yeah.
up. But all the other retail cuts, they're available to you every day of the week. Put your order in, masterpurveyors.com.
Which, by the way, if you go to Dave's YouTube channel at Real Meat Stick, you can see your trip in one of the shorts. Right, you put a short up of your
It
trip
is
to Meat Purveyors. Yeah,
correct.
be sure to go subscribe to Dave's channel. Here we go. Greg says the secret to tune is the tuning plates or the steel plate in a reverse flow for the flavor. Yeah, so in a reverse flow, that's a great thing to bring up. Is like I said early in the early days of designing pits, in the engineering side of things on Smoker Builder. That's where I'm from. For those that are new to the podcast, but when we first started designing pits, we were all about having a dead even cooking chamber temp, and we didn't understand at the time, but what we were doing by creating that perfect cooking environment for temperatures, we were sacrificing flavor. And that's really important to understand about offsets and reverse flows and stuff like that. So somebody I always laughed at back in the day on the reverse flow side of things was Lang. Well, Ben has been building pits longer than freaking anybody I know in reverse flows. And his baffle plate gap, which is the gap at the end of the plate, is a lot larger, like double what I would say it is. There's also a whole nother segment of the barbecue guys out there that came from, they got their start on websites like the Smoke Ring, places like that. Morgan Felden came from there with his calculator. And they were always saying that your baffle plate gap had to be the same size as the throat opening, which is the opening from the firebox to the cook chamber, had to be the same size as that or bigger. Well, from our world, we were trying to get a completely different result. We were trying to get dead even cook chamber temps lengthwise and vertically. I wanted to fill that thing up with 50 pork butts on a 500-gallon pit, and I wanted them all to finish within 2 degrees of each other. That's what I wanted. So for a capacity cooking, that's the perfect way. But if you want flavor and you want like really good texture and stuff like that, now we got to get into some sacrifices. We got to be willing to sacrifice convenience to get that result that we want with the end product. And that's what we're talking about with sloppy fire management, sloppy airflow, leaning into things like uneven cooking chamber temps and stuff like that. And how our Liberty 94 that we've been talking about for the guys that are just joining us, the Liberty 94, we've kind of made it to where that pit can do both. If you really want to have an even cook chamber temp, you can adjust the flow tuner baffle plate and pull that off. Or if you want to just take it out completely and have a really sloppy fire and get that amazing result like Dave got, you can pull that off too. Yeah, so that's interesting. That whole thing is. Let's see here. What else we got in here, Dave? Donnie Thomas said you have to do things differently with milder wood like post oak. So, how do you think the post oak you cooked with stacked up to the other wood, like the cherry wood and the apple that you used?
So this was because this wood was processed, done professionally. It burns a lot cleaner. I'm going to say that it burns as far as maintaining the temperature. Again, it's not sizzling. When I was putting in the local wood, the apple wood, the cherry woods, they weren't dried the same way. Even if they were kiln dried, I would have had a little bit more of a benefit than what was provided to me. The professionally done wood from that came in the post oak, there's no bark on it. Nothing's there. All this other wood, I'm out there and I'm having to peel any of the bark off or use something to get the bark off. The flavor that the fruit woods impart is incredible. That's why I add that in. Also, the cherry wood, you get that beautiful mahogany smoke ring, which is what
Yeah.
people look for. So as I'm cutting into the brisket and those that are at the event are tasting it, the first thing they're noticing is the bark on the outside. Let's get into
Yeah.
mouthfeel. Let's get a little bit into that. And I know, again, we're nerding out. So
Yeah.
because of the rub on the outside, it has that nice salty, grainy texture. And I was spritzing, so you have that beef flavor. But ultimately, the fruit wood, like the cherry wood, imparts that beautiful color, gives it a nice smell. Whereas, as Donnie was saying, the post oak is a lot milder, and it's what's available in Texas. It's what's available in Georgia and some other places. I wish I had it locally, just like you do, growing in the backyard. I don't, and
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to a cook where I can use, now that that wood's here, to use that exclusively. Uh,
Yeah.
the only downside is that it's a lot more expensive to do that type of cook because it has to be brought to me. I have to order this. So you have shipping costs and everything else, which thank you, for getting it for me, but
Yeah.
I'm
No
going to
worries.
use it sparingly. I
Yeah.
believe that had I used this exclusively on the cook, if there's 50 sticks in a box, that I would have gone through 40 of those sticks already.
Yeah, blending is the answer. When you have to purchase wood on the
Yes.
internet, blending is the answer. So pick a mild wood that you can get locally, whatever that is.
Right.
If it's apple, it's apple. If it's like red oak, it's red oak. Find ways of drying the wood, which actually something that I've talked about in the past is use, and this is stupid, right? You can try this at home. Your wife's probably going to kill you or me for saying it, but dry it in your oven at the house,
Oh, great idea.
just like on low and slow for a while. Like a kiln is just something that heats the wood up, boils the vapor out, the water out into water vapor, and it will do that. And then we're trying to just get that wood, all the moisture out that we can, not all of it, but get a lot of moisture out. And then what you'll find out is that even if you super dry wood, then you store it, it will pull water vapor back in. The thing from all of my history with refrigeration, food equipment, all that kind of stuff I ever dealt with is vapor pressure moves independent of air pressure. Nerding out here. So what happens is that wood will absorb some moisture just from the environment. So if you are afraid you're going to over dry it, don't worry. Stack it like we talked about, box style, like your wood is stacked, and it'll pull some moisture back in. But that's the perfect reason to use a pellet smoker, in my opinion, is to actually like season your wood. So I think not all kiln dried box purchased wood is equal though. I think that like if you go to Academy and buy whatever's on the shelf, I think that's production seasoned wood. And if you actually get it home and you stick some of that wood in your cooker, if we're talking about an offset here, when you stick that wood in your cooker and it starts to light on fire, there's a certain amount of heat it's going to require just for that wood to come up to temperature.
Mhm.
By the time it actually gets up to temperature, you're going to start seeing that boiling process start to happen. And I've personally seen that wood in those boxes like at Academy and stuff. You'll start to see the water boiling out the end grain. It's like foam comes out. And that's how you know that your wood is still wet. It's basically got to get rid of all of that so that the core of the wood will come up to temperature before it will actually combust. And that's why your fire takes a while to get started. And you said you've seen some of that on your home
I
supplied wood.
I
Yeah,
did, yes.
yeah, yeah.
Sizzling.
Sizzling.
And Frank, what you just did is you just, for every gentleman in the audience, whether they're live with us right now or listening to this on a podcast, you just sold every gentleman on how they're going to overcome the adversity of explaining to their wife that they don't have enough cookers and they need one more.
That's
When they
right. We
go
got
to
to
their
have one
wife,
to kiln dry.
when they go to their wife, oh no, you said something very unique. Hold up.
Okay.
Here's 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 the kicker to what you just said. Uh taking the wood and putting it in your wife's oven to heat it up, right? If you can overcome that fight, you can for sure overcome that argument of I need just one more cooker. I need to go to my wife to get permission. Just simply don't even bother asking your wife. Just take the
So
wood and put it in her oven and heat it up there. And watch how fast she tells you to go get whatever it is and go cook
that you
outside
need.
again. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
go get it.
That's yeah. That's hilarious. That's a great strategy I never thought of. But okay, so true story, years ago, I thought I hit the biggest deal in the world, man, because I'm in Missouri and then I travel over to see my buddies over on the Kansas line. And when you get down into like Baxter Springs and stuff like that, KU, Kentucky University has like these pecan groves down there. And man, I landed on some pecan wood, boy, through this deal. And found a guy down there had it $75 a rick, which that's a whole nother podcast. Let's get into talking about how to buy wood. Like we had an episode about how to buy wood, but I'm talking about how to buy wood like in volume and what it's called and all of that, right? That's a very debatable subject. But so I bought a rick, which is called a face cord, and for $75 from this dude, brought it home. And I always, at the time, I always kept my wood inside because I was afraid to let it rain on the wood. So I did that and I stacked it up. And I don't know, it was spring when I got it, and I stacked it in the garage. About 3 4 weeks goes by, and we got the garage doors open. It's May, whatever, and there's this bug. I'll get into this here in a second about kiln dry and why that's a requirement of transporting wood. But I had this thing in there, this wood stack, and the cicada wood borers hatched in my garage. And let me tell you, they're kind of like black and yellow stripy, and to the untrained eye, they don't look like a wasp, but some people could think they're wasps. They were everywhere in my
Wow.
garage. I mean, everywhere. And that it lasted for a long time. And that's when I found out about those cicada wood borers. And you'll know you got them before they hatch. You'll know you got them because you'll see little piles of sawdust on the floor. That's an instant thing it'll actually be on the wood. So like on the wood split, when you look at it, there'll be like something's digging and they're kicking the wood powder out of the hole. It was everywhere, man. It was such a deal. Anyway, so I laugh about it now, and I don't store my wood in the garage. But that was a deal right there, man. So if those bugs hatch in your wife's oven or whatever happens there, that'll be a whole nother level of permission to go buy whatever you want to season your wood. That's hilarious, man. Got to give a couple shout outs here real quick. AK Barbecue Man says sloppy is my style up here in Alaska. He's talking about our sloppy fire management and how it definitely benefits you in your barbecue. Right here, we got my bro Jordan Schilling. Love you, dude. He says, "Can we get a video of Frank bench pressing the mini, the mini smoke slinger?" Don't know that I could pull that off. That's awful funny. Let's see, Greg. The shape of splits changed fire burn time. Let me look for the video of the guy in Texas running a huge bee smoker. He's absolutely correct. A square or round log does need to be preheated before it will actually fully combust. And so while we're talking about all of this kiln dry stuff, the reason that companies have to kiln dry their wood before they can box it and ship it is because of pest management. So, like, there's quarantines on certain insects that can be an invasive species in another area of the country. For instance, the emerald ash borer here in Missouri, they actually had a quarantine over multiple states. My buddy's a conservation agent, and anyway, they had a quarantine, and you could not transport wood outside of Missouri into certain other states. Like Missouri and Kansas was okay, but like I couldn't like load wood here and drive to California because there's a risk of me spreading that insect wherever I go. So what they do is they have these kiln dry regulations, and so that's why these guys have to kiln dry their wood, because there's a whole nother debate about like how dry your wood should be, if artificial drying is beneficial over natural drying and stuff like that. So that's where that all came from with the bugs. Great stuff. I'm hogging the conversation, bro.
No, we're getting to some great conversation that's in here. I can jump in at any point. I just got to see where you are in the
Well, here we go. I'm going to pull up some more comments. If
Sure.
Big Jack Ministries asks, so on a 250, what size should splits be? My opinion on a 250 would be somewhere around the 3.5 to 4 inch diameter. I personally do like triangle shaped wood, although square will work. And somewhere around the 12-inch length is what I like. Bingo is my pit that I use. Yep, yep. Golly, man, we're getting a lot of comments in here, Dave. Are you
Great
seeing what's
stuff.
happening in here?
Great stuff. Because this is what people are interested in. How
Yeah,
can they use their offset cookers to be able to make the best brisket of their life?
that's right, man. Let's see. Hojo still in there hanging in. I have a round grate with legs that fits in my firebox, which I use to reverse sear proteins I have smoked. Yep, log rack is what we would call that, and
Yep.
it does work good. The only downside to a log rack when we're talking about sloppy fires is coal bed management. It's really tough to keep. It depends on how it's built, I guess, but the coals tend to fall through the cracks if they're too big, I suppose. Let's see, Donnie Thomas earlier, he was asking, is it still up? Yeah, all of my content from the early days of Frank Cox on the barbecue internet is still up. However, I have not let it go what my name was on the barbecue internet circa 2007. Um, if it ain't raining, we ain't training.
He's right.
Jordan's a Marine.
Right.
Appreciate your service, brother. Yeah, Jordan's a Marine, and he says, if it ain't raining, we ain't training.
Never
So you got to cook in
forgets.
the rain. Hojo giving Donnie some love. Donnie Thomas says, Donnie knows how to smoke a shoulder clod. Remember his post from the Brethren. Yeah, the Barbecue Brethren, by the way, can I circle back to my bro, Dave Baldine?
Sure.
If you look at the screen here on the top, my top right of the screen, it says Wired Barbecue. So a very, very dear friend of mine and one of the people that made barbecue what it is today passed away. And his name is Dave Baldine, and I'm flying his logo today in out of remembrance of him. So if you don't mind, go to YouTube and type in Wired Barbecue, Wired BBQ. I'll post his name in his channel here in the comments again. I posted it earlier. But anyway, give him a subscribe. This guy, anybody's name that you ever heard in barbecue, this man's got early footage of him on his channel, him or her, Diva Q, Mo Kason, whoever, from way back in the early days. And you'll get to see those people's journey through Dave Baldine's content. So anyway, massive respect and rip my brother. So anyway, there you go. Lots of cool stuff on the barbecue interwebs, man. That's where the community started. Gonna have to slam through. By the way, if you want to see more about what Dave was talking about, Dustin popped the link in here for us. Masterpurveyors.com. This whole episode was founded on the idea that Dave just cooked a 37-pound, bone-in, beautiful brisket that was unbelievable. And anyway, we're still talking about it. Crazy, man. Here's a great question. Dave, how many briskets can you cook on the Liberty 94?
Excellent question. Oh, I've been waiting for this one. So this is a loaded question. I'm going to tell you why. That all depends upon the size of the briskets that you're putting on. So if you were asking me, Dave, how many 37-pound briskets bone in can you fit on there? That's a different question than how many briskets that I can get at my local HEB, Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, whatever you have by you. That changes things. So typically, if I'm picking up a brisket that's, say, 18 to 20 pounds, by the time I trim it, I'm down to like a 15-pound brisket. So let's use 15 pounds as our gold standard. If I took 15-pound briskets, I could easily, now, boy, the camera went to AI because I moved. Yeah, you see how it changed on its own? Suddenly had a videographer in the room. And that's AI for you. So I could then, if I space them out correctly, almost let's call them on angles. I could fit 5 of them in there at 15 pounds. Just based upon the massive size of a 37, take that, put it in half, right? So now I could putting them on in a row on an angle, I could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across.
Yep.
Or I could do possibly, if they're a little bit smaller, I could put them parallel to each other and probably go 2, 4, 6.
Yeah, man, I wish I could do a whiteboard on here so I could draw.
Oh, you're right.
We were going to talk about the airflow and stuff like that. But yeah, so it doesn't honestly matter how. That's the question that comes up when you talk about how many briskets can you fit. We're talking about sometimes we have to ask how many briskets can you fit on a pit and get even cooks on your briskets. Excuse me. So that's what sets the Liberty 94 apart, is that it's a 48-inch long cook chamber, but because of the baffle plate we're talking about in this pit, the vertical baffle, which we call the flow tuner baffle, that pit, it does not matter which direction we face the briskets. In other words, like when you're talking about like 1,000-gallon pit, and you'll see a lot of these internet pit masters or professional pit masters at restaurants tell you turn the point into the wind. We're almost talking about like the direction of airflow now, to where you turn your point to where the firebox, and people are listening on audio on iTunes. On the right-hand side of the screen is my firebox, and all the airflow is going to the left of my left anyway. And so what happens is that we face the point into the wind and the fat cap up. And what happens is that airflow is going through the pit. We're getting the fat that's in that point, and it's protecting the flat, because the flat does not have as much intramuscular fat as the point does. And so it's going to take a little bit longer to render. Whenever the fat cap is hit, it's going to protect the rest of the brisket. And we're not going to render so much fat out too fast, because you can actually just like cook the flat way ahead of schedule, since there's not as much fat in there to lick to. What did you call that reaction with the fat?
Oh, what we're
This
doing
is a
is we're
Dave word.
taking we're taking the fat and we're taking the collagen becomes
Yep.
gelatin.
Yeah, and so we don't want that to happen too fast in the flat, otherwise
Right.
we lose all that juice. It's just gonna rain out if we're not wrapped, we're not gonna be able to recover that juice, etcetera. So they say, "P turn your point into the wind so it's protected," and then as a matter of fact, if your pit is like a 1,000-gallon with a too small of a firebox, like a 250 is what we would call too small, you're going to need like a blocker log because you're moving so much air so fast that the velocity goes up. So what happens is that you got to protect the end of that, and you'll see that blocker log deployed in a big pit like that. In the Liberty 94, we don't have to worry about any of that. Like it
No.
doesn't even matter. The baffle plate in our Liberty 94, if you go to smokeslinger.com, you can see that pit. What happens is that the air's coming in, and just like a weather pattern is the best way I can explain it. If you ever watch the meteorologist and they start talking about this spin in the weather, and the weather system is spinning vertically up and down. So what happens is the air in the smoker does that. That's actually what it does. So, and we can get all into pipe design and like, all of that, friction loss, velocity, mass flow. We can go all the way down the rabbit hole if you wanted, but just to make it simple, the air, whenever it comes in, it's superheated off that fire, and it's really hyperactive. And the thing it wants to do is be on top. Everybody that wants to go fast in traffic either wants to be in front or on top. That's what they want to do, and that's what the air wants to do. So that goes straight up to the top, and that's all we're doing is we're just encouraging it to do it as early in the pit as possible. And then once it gets up to the top, now we've got that surface of the pit, which is all steel. And we're going to let that radiant heat escape as much as possible across the length of that pit. Everything's just going to kind of like go across the ceiling. And if you ever watch firefighting videos, which Dave could tell you all about, what happens is when the air comes in, the smoke, the heat,
Hmm.
all of that flame, everything goes straight to the top and it just crawls along the ceiling. That's why they tell you to get down in
Correct.
the house. And so it goes all the way to the other end of the pit. And that's why we drop that collector box down on the smokestack. So it wants to go down at the other end. But we have to do one more thing. We need to make sure that we spin some of that air back under the cooking grate. And the way that we accomplish that in the Liberty 94 offset is we close down the smokestack damper, and we're probably only running that damper open about one, maybe two fingers. I think you actually said you had yours open an eighth of an inch
Correct.
during the end of that cook, right?
That's right.
So what happens is where velocity and mass flow are two different things. So we have so much air volume, which is the mass that's going up through the smokestack, but we're restricting that. So then when we restrict it, the velocity goes up. So we're spinning that air back under the rack. And what I always tell people to do is look at a brisket that's on a big pit, tilt it up, and look at the bottom of that brisket about the time that you're wrapping, and look at the color and the bark compared to the top of the brisket. And how you know that you've got what I call undertow is that you see that bark on the bottom of your pit of your brisket is dark. If it's a dark color, then you're getting that undertow and the air's going under the rack. And that's what we're trying to accomplish in the Liberty 94, which it works really great. Was the bottom of your bone-in brisket, was that barked up
Everything was barked up. The cyclonic air,
evenly?
evenly. The cyclonic
Yeah.
air that you're talking about, it touched every bit of this brisket. And then getting to that point where I use it as a a holding oven, it was the dirtiest of dirtiest smoke because we didn't have that same type of airflow. At that point, I was really choking down the heat. I was choking everything to just smoldering in order to maintain that low temperature. So we had the dirty. And when I opened up that cook chamber, it looked like I had a smoke machine going. It just
Mhm.
billowed out, which again makes for great content, great video for that ta-da moment because that smoke is just it's pouring out and I'm tearing. I'm tearing from joy. We're finally done. I can go to bed. I can't believe it. but I'm also tearing because of all that smoke
Smoke
penetrating into
in
my
your
eye.
eyes.
Yes.
That's a good point. I never experienced that. If you wear contacts, the contacts actually protect your eyes from the smoke. However, be careful because they could actually dry out. Um, but ancient pitmaster competition barbecue guy trick right there. Wear contacts, even if they're like my buddy Tom. We were cooking the Royal one year, and he called his eye doctor because he had to wear glasses, but he didn't have contacts. He called his eye doctor and said, "Hey, could I get a pair of those test contacts that are like no prescription?" He's like, "Yeah, come on by and get them." Anyway, they said test. I got a picture of his eyeball. It said test across his eye.
Yeah.
That he cooked all weekend like that. It was pretty cool. All right, here we go. El Presidente, Dustin, he says, real meat stick. I will do a continuous live soon of a cold smoke style brisket like Bar A guys do.
Yep.
He did that once already. It turned out phenomenal on the full size smoke slinger, which, if you don't know about smoke slinger pits, go to smokeslinger.com. You can check it out. Greg says a warmer on an offset, guys use it to dry wood while in a cook. I love that approach. I actually do dry my wood directly in the cook chamber when I'm cooking, if I have the opportunity. If I don't have room, I put it on top of the firebox. If my firebox is insulated, I put it on top of the cook chamber at the firebox end of the pit. If all of that fails, use the wife's oven as we declared earlier, and you will get permission to buy whatever you want, or you will be served papers. One of the two, I suppose. Anyway, Dustin dries his head of the cook in the cook chamber while cooking, and actually on the full size smoke slinger, you can dry it in the drawer if you're
That's right.
not fired up. You have one drawer that doesn't have a fire. Fill that sucker up with wood, dry wood,
Uh-huh.
the whole cook while you're cooking in the other basket. That's a great idea. What's up, Trumpet? Glad you're here, bro. They good for fishing. We catch them ugly. Catch them when they're around here when they ugly. All right. How did the brisket turn out? We talked about that. You'll have to see the replay, Trumpet. We went way deep. Jordan Schilling. I set splits on top of the main chamber to pre-warm them a little if I have something in the warmer. There you go. 12-inch splits is what Big Jack is using. Don't forget to go follow my buddy Dave Baldine's YouTube channel. He just passed away. You need to see the story of barbecue, where it started, just so you know. What's up, Daddy Dutch? Appreciate you, brother. Dave, did you get to hook up on that?
Yes. In fact,
Yes.
yes. So Dustin had mentioned a little bit earlier in the comments how he wants to come into town for a 300-hour cook. I don't know if I'm down for 300 hours.
300 hour?
That would be pretty intense. I'm going to need a team of people with IVs and infusions of caffeine and stimulants to keep me up for 300 hours. And it was also mentioned here, was I like a zombie? If we do a 300-hour cook, we're all going to be zombies.
All of us.
All of us.
Unless we take turns.
Correct.
Big Jack wants to know, when will y'all be back on? We attempt to do it every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. The Barbecue Nerds podcast is actually what this is called. And we do take the replay, is available immediately after the show. And when I am not fighting too many fires all at the same time, I try to cut it up and I put it edited version that removes all my ums and uhs because I'm terrible at that, and put it on the audio podcasts. So there you go. El Presidente saving up for a 94. El Presidente is Dustin McCormack in Kaufman, Texas, and he is Smoke Slinger. Anyway, he's the boss. BAWUSE.
Boss.
Bouse. Solidify. Dustin was asking, were we talking about your smokestack damper being an 1/8 inch or 1/8 open?
I was so exhausted that I believe he told me that it should have been 1/8, and I interpret that to mean 1/8 inch. I don't know if he meant 1/8 open. He said run it an eighth, and so I went for an eighth.
It's let's see. How much bark should you expect? Chris
Oh,
is
I was
asking.
barking. We were barking.
Yeah. So when I'm cooking a brisket, I don't really like go by inches of bark, but whatever the thickness of the fat cap is, basically is what I'm looking for, because there's this awesome reaction that happens with any rub you put on. So um, salt is the key ingredient in, I believe, in bark formation, because there's a no other seasoning that I'm aware of can draw into the meat deeper than the depth of the smoke ring, which is approximately a quarter of an inch. It's actually less than that. I think it's an eighth of an inch. Everything else, the salt can penetrate deep. And what happens is you have this, and Dave can correct me. I could be just talking completely out my, whatever. But salt in a rub can penetrate very deeply. And when salt goes in, it also pulls out. And what pulls out is that myoglobin, right, Dave?
And the water. Yeah, you're
And
pulling out water and you're pulling out the myoglobin. Correct.
water and myoglobin pull out. And then that emulsifies whatever your bark layer is, which is like your rub, your sugar, anything that can caramelize, that kind of stuff. And so when you layer flavors on, the old hat pro that I followed, and I went to Donnie Bray from Warren County Pork Choppers back in the day, put on a barbecue class, and it was mind blowing for me because that was the first one I attended. And he said, "This is how you put the last thing you put on is the first thing they're going to taste." And he was talking about barbecue judges, but we're talking about people. So you layer your flavors in that order. So salt, then sweet, then smoke, then heat is the way it should go. So you want them to get a little salty bite, and because you're going to want them to come back for more. And then you're going to want to have salt, then sweet. So you're going to want them to have some sweet because they're going to be like, oh, wow. Then you're going to get some smoke in there because you don't want to blast them away with a bunch of smoke flavor up front. And then a little bit of heat at the back of the palate. So you start in that reverse order, but salt is a key ingredient on that base layer because we need to get this reaction happening in the meat, pulling that out.
Right.
Otherwise, we won't emulsify the rub. That's why you see the rub sweating, and then it liquefies and literally starts to do the magic. And that is the first layer,
Hmm.
all of that stuff. Your second layer is after you wrap. The third layer is whenever you're saucing at the very end, if you sauce or mop or whatever. So, you got anything to add to that, Dave? I went deep.
I just going back to the salt. That's a big thing. When we salt and preservation, salt. When we didn't have refrigeration, in order for our foods to be able to last through the winter time or even through the summer, whatever it is, everything was salted. So you look at your salted cod, for example. The whole reason why it's salted is for preservation. Then we soak it in order to get that salt out and to reintroduce the waters, the hydration back into it.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. Oh, let's see. We got tri-tip coming up pretty soon, Chris.
Yes,
Yep.
we do. It's coming. I got 4 prime tri-tips.
300 degrees, sarcastic. Oh, he meant 300 degrees, not 300 hour. Appreciate the 1,100 people that tuned in for this. Thank you, Hojo, for pointing that out. OMG. That's crazy. Let's see. Scott, I store all my wife's Amazon boxes in the back of the barn to use as permission to buy another sucker. She's just about has accumulated enough for the Liberty. So, yeah, there you go. That's one way of measuring permission is how many Amazon boxes. My best briskets are lightly salted, is what Dustin says, with fine sea salt, saran wrapped and refrigerated overnight. That's a whole nother podcast episode there. Barbecue is better the next day, always. I believe that. So whether you rest in a warmer or rest in the fridge and reheat, you might want to play with that a little bit. What's your thoughts
Right.
on that, Dave?
I agree, and there's a lot of places out there that will cook their meat to a certain point, stop the process, and then the next day start it up again. That's a
Yeah.
secret in the industry.
Yeah.
Most people
Yep.
don't know that that's done.
The first time I ever heard that was with chicken wings, and the old boy told me he ran a pizza place. He said, "I par cook my wings." So he par cooked them in the oven. He would
Right.
run them through that pizza oven, and then he would flash fry them when they're ready to go. Long as you get them above 140, and then you bring them down below 140, stay out of the no zone, you will be fine. There you go. Well, hey guys, Dave, you got anything else you want to add real quick?
Well, I'm just looking here, and I'm looking at Dustin's comment about 300 hours and being joking. One of the upcoming cooks is going to involve it's what we call the round of the cow. I'm sure people have heard of the top round. They've heard of the bottom round. They've heard of the inside round, the outside round. All of that comes back to the thigh of the cow. So why I'm bringing this up? You brought up the chicken wing. We have the drums. We've all seen the drumstick of the chicken. We've been to places like Disney World or medieval times where they serve a turkey drumstick. But get ready, coming soon is the steamship round. What that is the entire thigh. It is a huge drumstick of beef, and we're going to be doing that on the smoke slinger. So
Let's
here's
go.
the question, El Presidente, if you're coming into town, will we be spending 8 hours on the smoke slinger, or will we be spending 30 hours on the smoke slinger?
How
Time
many
will tell,
bedrooms
but
you
I'm going to
got?
need people here for that.
How
That's
many
that.
bedrooms you got?
We're gonna we're gonna need. I have room here,
Enough.
but we might need to put some campers outside. Uh, I'm I'm anticipating that this piece of meat is going to weigh in the 80 to 100 pound range, probably
Lord.
closer to 100 pounds. And the way that we discussed this on Friday is if I take the whole thing, bring it back here, and I do some of the trimming on my own, that we'll get out of that a Thor's hammer, that being the shank. So that'll be a separate cook.
Yeah.
And then we'll also have, call it from the knee up.
Yeah.
We'll have that whole drumstick, the entire round, the
Is it the
steamship of
hind
beef.
quarter or the
It's the hind
front?
quarter. No, it's the
Hind
hind.
quarter.
Yep, that's the round. Whereas the
Yeah,
front is our shoulder.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Dude, it sounds incredible. Yep.
So
I'm interested.
I can't wait for this. I think that we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. A lot of ideas were kicked around on Friday. We've got fantails coming up of different types of animals. We've got entire what we'll call saddles of lamb that'll be coming up. Huge projects that will be taken on thanks to Masters, who's going to be assisting me in getting a hold of a lot of these proteins, things that you would be able to find in your area of the country, and things that I'm able to get right here at a wholesale market. That's the distribution center to places like, get ready, Peter Luger's Steakhouse. That's exactly the same type of meat. So those of you that are familiar with Peter Luger's, that is the same short loin that I would have here if I decide to cook the entire short loin going
What's
across.
the
Yes.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, what's the what's dead gummit, I lost it. I'm sorry. How many you told me at one point how many
Yeah.
pounds of beef a day they process in that place. And it was mind blowing.
Imagine every day that the trucks are coming in with meat, with whole sides of beef hanging on a hook. I believe that the refrigerated, just the outside dock, which is refrigerated, is, I think it's 250,000 square feet. That's just the
Unbelievable.
refrigerated dock. Then, as you see in the video in my reels, it's only 10 seconds long. I'm in there next to the sides of beef. I'm in there in the dry aging room. Fortunately, I have access to things like this, carte blanche, as some would say. But when I go to do this type of video, it's clearly after the jobbers have come in, everybody's loaded up for the day, and things are going out to the restaurants and the catering halls and such.
Sure.
Yeah.
Unbelievable,
It's a
man.
union shop, so the unions don't like, and neither do the USDA inspectors. They don't like when I'm coming through with cameras doing things when it's prime time. You can understand that. It's business.
Sure, sure. It's just
Yeah.
business. Jordan, I appreciate you watching, brother. Appreciate you, man. We got to get together and do a cook up in here. One more time, guys. I know. Thank you so much to everybody that watched tonight. Make sure to go check out Wired Barbecue. There's a story on that channel that is as old as barbecue is. And if you truly want to know people like David Compton, who passed on before us, and you want to see Mo Kason's story, and Diva Q and people like that, head over to Wired Barbecue and check it out. Todd Johns from Plowboys is on there. You can see barbecue evolve as we know it today on the internet because of Dave. Rest in peace, my brother. So, anyway, on that note, guys, we'll be back here next week, Monday night, hopefully. Tuesday night, if I fail, we'll be back on here. And you can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, on the edited version of this. And you can come back here anytime on @Real Meat Stick on YouTube or @Smoker Builder on YouTube and watch the replay of this entire episode that is doggone near 2 hours long.
That's it for this round of Meat, Heat, and Obsession. I cooked that brisket low and slow, held it long and loving, and came out the other side a better man. Stay nerdy, stay smoky, and keep that fire burning.
Cheers, everybody. We'll see you later.